everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I'm joined by Greg, also of Hail Varsity, and we are here for a special second bye week of the season recap. We just heard from Coach Scott Frost. Obviously, the schedule is a little bit different than usual this week, but also the news has been a little different than usual this week, so there has been plenty to talk about. In fact, most of what Coach Frost discussed was really the news of the week, so I don't really think I need to say in case you missed it, because I'm guessing you didn't.
Right.
But for some reason, if you did, not only did Trev Alberts earlier in the week say that Coach Scott Frost would return for the 2022 football season with a restructured contract, but he also has parted ways with 4 of his offensive assistants, being Matt Lubick, Mario Verduzco, Greg Austin, and Ryan Held. The only offensive coach that has been retained is Sean Beckton. So it's been a big week. And just if you're like, what does that contract look like? Well, really quick. He has he basically has cut his buyout in half, so it's now only $8.5 million, only $8.5 million. And his salary went from $5 million to $4 million. So that's what we know right now. Obviously, there's some additional incentives that we have not been made aware of yet. Trev Alberts made comments about those during his radio show earlier in the week, so I'm guessing we'll have plenty more to come.
Yes.
But for now, let's focus on this. Greg, okay. I feel like we also need to give you the quick news. I'm just like, I don't even know what to ask you at the moment.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, we could go a lot of different directions here.
First and foremost, if you're like, who's going to be coaching? Because Nebraska does have to head to Wisconsin and does have to face Iowa at home. Ron Brown is taking over for
Ryan Held.
Ron Brown is taking over for running backs.
Yes. Yeah, Mike Casano is
Yes.
taking over at wide receiver. Frank Verducci is taking over at offensive line, and Steve Cooper is taking over at quarterback.
Now, Steve Cooper has worked with the quarterbacks throughout his time at
I
Nebraska.
think each of those support staff that are moving into those roles now have been with Nebraska and doing those roles for a couple of years, I think at least in each case. So they're very familiar with those position groups. They're just stepping into bigger jobs for the time being.
And Verducci has a lot of experience
Yes.
coaching offensive line. I mean, just go look up his bio, and he does have a lot of experience. So it's not like there is a lot of experience that is stepping into these roles. Obviously, Ron Brown has experience coaching running backs as well.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, I guess, through the rest of the bye week and into the next couple of weeks. But Craig, one thing that stood out to me, and I'm curious to get your kind of take, is Scott Frost said how much this week has really been difficult for the team. They're very disappointed. The players, especially on offensive line, are really sad to see their coaches go. What was kind of your takeaway from the vibe and different things that were said today?
I think that it's very safe to assume that the vibe was tough around the facility for the last few days. I don't think that Scott Frost really even needed to say that based on his body language when even just asked about it right before he even said anything about that. You just got the sense that things have been, it's been a tough mood and kind of somber around the facility. Yep. And I think, like you said, it's totally understandable because we're now enough years into these coaches' tenure to where almost all of those position groups are in a spot where everyone that's here in those position groups were recruited by those position coaches. And I know specifically running back, every scholarship running back was recruited by Ryan Held in his time here. The quarterbacks for sure as well, right? And so that becomes even more difficult because there's such an attachment, because those coaches are the ones that you got to know when you were still in high school trying to make the decision to come to Nebraska. Those bonds are tight.
Yeah, and for right now, if you're wondering if there's any, if there have been any departures from the team, Coach Frost did say no one has left. Outside of if you hear anything about this player wasn't at practice or whatever, he didn't give specifics, but a couple of players who had some things with family that they were not able to be at practice today. So he just kind of wanted to set that out there as, don't read too much into that. But right now, it sounds like the only player that could potentially have a decision to make at this point is JoJo Domann, which he also did not want to offer too much on. He said he has an agreement with JoJo that he doesn't want to say too much until JoJo is ready. Now, we do know that JoJo is playing with an injury that he will likely need to have surgery, it sounds like, on, is at least how he was phrasing it for us. And it's really at this point up to JoJo and what he wants to do.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those situations, too, that's still kind of evolving, maybe, right? Where I think that there's still some indecision there on what JoJo wanted to do post the Ohio State game and maybe what he's thinking about doing as of today in terms of if he can come back and play in one or both of these last 2 games.
I mean, he had a heck of a game against Ohio State, so
yeah,
you
really
never know if he wants to keep adding to that draft team.
Right, and you're playing 2 rivals. Remember that. There's a factor there, too. 2 rivals
that that fires everyone out, rivals.
Oh, sorry. I forgot that was still a thing. 2 rivals, sorry, folks. And 2 that I think JoJo in his career has not been on the winning side of any of those games against Wisconsin or Iowa. So that could play a factor here as well.
And, Coach Frost also kind of talked about, as the players are getting ready, how this will be difficult because he's kept saying this is just the business. This is just the nature of the business of coaching. But, in the case of like Mario Verduzco, he has Logan Smothers throwing better than he has. He definitely had those players as ready as they could be, but he kept kind of referring back to you can't keep doing the exact same thing and expect different results. And so that was ultimately what led to the decision. Now, as far as time frame of replacing those coaches permanently, it sounds like his first and foremost priority is finding that offensive coordinator that he trusts, that will allow him to get the play calling responsibilities off of his plate so he can start focusing more broadly as a CEO of this team, if you will. But at the same time, he doesn't know what it's going to look like and how it'll shake out. Maybe he takes more responsibilities with the quarterback and they take that coaching position and turn it into a full-time special teams coach. I know a lot of you want a special teams coach, so that is an option. That is on the table. So we'll kind of see how it shakes out, but offensive coordinator is first.
Yes, and I thought the very key thing, and my ears perked up when he said that, and you mentioned it, was someone that I trust. Because I think that there's been so much conversation, especially from those of you watching this, about whether or not Scott Frost needs to kind of go outside of his quote-unquote coaching tree to really shake things up and make this hire. From the way that he talked today, it did not feel like that was going to necessarily be the case, but he also left himself a little bit of caveat and said that you never know, so I will also say you never know. But that, to me, was really interesting, the part about it has to be someone that I can trust to hand this offense over, because the offense, as I've said multiple times, is his thing.
It is, and he said that too. He's been calling this offense for 10 years.
Right.
So
it's hard to just give that up. That is not as easy as people make that sound.
And part of the reason I did ask him about Sean Beckton and the choice to retain him, and a big part of it is he felt like he's executing on all the levels that he needs him to. So they did want some retention. They did want somebody to carry over. We know that Sean Beckton is one of the top recruiters on this staff. He also has history in a lot of the states that they're interested in recruiting, so there was a lot of reasons to retain him, and he also has seen improvement in his room over this year. So again, Frost felt he has executed on all the levels he's needed him to. So he has remained on staff, and we'll see how the rest of it goes.
Yeah, and as Frost said, you do need someone to kind of bridge that gap, right? He can't be the only one that can bridge the gap between what was happening before and then what needs to change. You do have to have more voices in the room to continue that continuity. So that makes sense as well, outside of Sean Beckton doing a really good job, which he has.
If you're looking for timelines as far as when you might hear about anybody who could be replacing, it does sound like it sounds like a good chance we won't know anything until postseason. Frost did mention a lot of people he might be interested in are currently coaching elsewhere, so it's not exactly like you're bringing them in tomorrow. So there will be a bit of patience from everyone, as this is going to be a very interesting few weeks, especially as that early signing period gets closer. And they're looking to sell a vision, which we have talked about, and what is the recruiting pitch at this point.
That's what we talked about last week.
So it's going to be really interesting to watch, and so because of that, we appreciate you as always joining us. We won't be back with another recap like this for this week just because there's no other practice availability, but we will be back next week as they get prepped for Wisconsin, and we always have every video that you might be interested in, like the Coach Frost video that is right here on this YouTube channel. So go ahead, go watch it, get caught up, and leave comments, leave questions. If we're able to answer it or continue that conversation, we appreciate the opportunity to do so. We appreciate you watching. Again, we will be back next week with even more on what is happening.
There's a lot happening.
Busy time. Thank you as always. We'll talk to you later.